Shea is the former Assistant Secretary-General for Emerging Security Challenges at NATO, and he joins us now from London. Thanks for coming on the programme. What we've heard there, Ukraine wants weapons, weapons, weapons. So why isn't NATO stepping up?
Well, good afternoon, Juliet, and as always, thank you for having me on the programme. NATO is stepping up. I mean, first of all, NATO, the organisation, is not responsible for delivering weapons to Ukraine. That's done by all of the individual NATO allies. But certainly in a meeting in Brussels today with not just NATO foreign ministers, but also foreign ministers from Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Sweden and Finland, gave the Ukrainian foreign minister Kuleba a good platform to make his case and state what he needs, and then for the allies to see how they match what Ukraine needs with what they can supply. But a lot has gone into Ukraine already. I mean, for example, the United States has spent, since Russia first invaded on the 24th of February, $1.7 billion worth of weapons. And indeed, at the Brussels meeting, the US Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, said that for every single Russian tank in Ukraine, NATO countries have provided 10 anti-tank weapons. So I don't think it's a fact that NATO isn't responding. I think really it's two issues, very briefly. Number one, as this war is going on for a long time now, how do you put things on a more sort of permanent basis in terms of finance, training, weapons supplies, delivery? And number two, if the Ukrainians are going to now get involved in a much bigger type of battle against the Russians, how do you give them more sophisticated and heavier equipment? Those, for me, are the two big issues.
You mentioned finance there. Of course, they're talking about what you're talking about, what is being contributed by the United States and other Western powers. And Zelensky would say, well, the sums add up to what they're still spending on Russian energy. But look, let's talk about peace talks. Some want talks, others want a clean break. Are we seeing enough of a united front from NATO and European Union members?
Well, I think the fact is that the NATO allies are at summit level. Biden was in Europe just a couple of weeks ago. NATO foreign ministers today. NATO foreign ministers are meeting again in Berlin in a couple of weeks' time. Another NATO summit in Madrid in June. So I would argue, yes, I think the US is working overtime to gather the allies together to show that the front is still united, that everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet. Inevitably, as the sanctions become tougher to take, as the Ukrainians need more weapons, which have to be supplied, there's always going to be the risk of cracks and fissures opening up. But by continuing to have these high-level meetings all of the time, I think what the West is trying to do is to show Putin that, you think you can just sort of wait and we'll end up dividing ourselves. We might have done that in the past, but we're not going to do it this time round.
And just quickly, look, we keep hearing from our correspondents in the field that there's this huge anticipation of a new offensive. What do you think Russia's strategic plans are, and do they really have the capacity to see things through?
Well, they've obviously made enormous mistakes with their tactics since they first invaded, splitting up into too many little groups that were vulnerable to be attacked and taken out by the Ukrainian forces, attacking on too many fronts simultaneously. Clausewitz, the great Prussian strategist, would have said that there was a lack of a centre of gravity. On the other hand, let's not forget, Russia has had quite a lot of success seizing territory in eastern Ukraine, where it was already and where it can count on many pro-Russian separatist forces, and along the Black Sea coast, taking ports which are vital to Ukraine's economy. So I think Putin has decided that consolidate what you have, extend it further, because there the territory is closer to Russia and closer to Russian supply lines. But of course, this is not very appealing for Ukraine, because it stands to lose access to the sea, access to ports. It will be economically paralyzed, and it stands to lose in the Donbass many of its mining and coal producing and steel making facilities. So again, not good for any future Ukrainian economy post-conflict.
Dr. Jamie Shea, thank you very much for your insights.